The New York Mets got their center fielder, and no, it is not Luis Robert. Cedric Mullins is now a New York Met.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I was able to pull this beautiful graphic. They don't even know I did this, but I'm the managing editor. I can grab it. So here is the trade package that we can discuss today. Cedric Mullins is going to the New York Mets. They have their center fielder, and 3 pitching prospects are going in return. We'll talk about the prospects in a little bit here, but let's focus on the headlining piece, obviously, which is Cedric Mullins is now the Mets starting center fielder. They will not be trading for Luis Robert. Now, when it comes to the pursuit for Luis Robert, it was widely reported the Mets were in. It made more sense to get a right-handed complement to Jeff McNeil to have out in center field. But the White Sox clearly overplayed their hand because the Phillies, they made a pivot. They signed Harrison Bader. The Mets have pivoted. They have signed, or not signed. The Phillies have traded for Bader. That's a pet peeve of mine when people say that at the deadline, and I just did it myself. But the Phillies got Bader. The Mets get Mullins. The Padres maybe end up with Robert at the end of the day, maybe because they wait till the last minute. Whoever does make that trade, if somebody makes that trade, maybe it turns out to be a good deal for that team that pulls it off, or maybe the White Sox get what they want when it's all said and done. But the Mets ultimately could not wait, and they had an opportunity to trade from an area of strength in their farm system, which is their pitching lab, their pitching factory. We'll talk about the prospects in the next segment, but I'll put it as simply as this. It's 2 arms that were undrafted free agents that the Mets signed, and a guy that they signed for $10,000. Now, the guy they signed for $10,000, the international free agent signing, yeah, he touched 105 miles per hour in Port St. Lucie this year, so that one hurts a little bit. And again, we'll talk about the return in the next segment. But ultimately, if you could find those 3 guys, you could find 3 more next year. And so you were able to trade from an area of your farm system that does not hurt, and you get a guy that's better than Tyrone Taylor. And that's the bottom line. And it allows you to move Jeff McNeil to second base. I think what the Mets should do when it comes to just fitting the pieces together, and we'll touch on this a little bit more in the final segment, but my assumption here, you make this trade, that's it for your lineup. I think you probably option Ronny Mauricio down or Luis Acuna. But the reason why I say Mauricio is because you then allow Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, Jeff McNeil to hold down those 2 infield spots, and you give Mullins a month to see if a player in a contract year and a change of scenery can get hot. And Cedric Mullins has the ability to get hot. He's actually fairly hot right now. He put on a show in his final series playing in front of the home fans at Camden Yards, robbed a home run. I think he's actually robbed a couple of home runs over the past 10 days. His last 7 games, he's hitting .435, 2 home runs, .913 slug, playing some good baseball. If you look at really the ups and downs of his season, he started the year and was outstanding in the month of April. He had an .880 OPS, 5 games in March, an OPS over 1,000. You go to the month of May, month of June, OPS dropped below 600 each month, 574 in May, 500 in June. And in July, he has been playing good baseball, an .868 OPS, 290 average, 346 on base, 522 slug. To be completely honest, I didn't even realize he had been that good in July because I started to write Cedric Mullins off with those 2 struggling months. And with the fact that if you look at the defensive metrics, they would tell you that Cedric Mullins has not been a great defender in center field. And I'm actually pulling up all this stuff on the fly here, but I'm looking right now at the Fangraphs. Yeah, this year they have a -13 defensive run save, 2 outs above average. So now he's played a lot more center field than Jeff McNeil, but by defensive run save, Jeff McNeil is a significantly better fielder than Cedric Mullins in center. But then you watch Cedric Mullins rob a home run, and I don't, as much as Jeff McNeil did an amazing job using all of his athleticism and climbing the wall and leaping off and getting himself a lift, Cedric Mullins just has way more athleticism. Okay, so Cedric Mullins, while the metrics would tell you, and outs above average like Cedric in center field this year, 3 outs above average. Actually, I'm looking No, it's 2 outs above average. And yes, still minus 13, which is wild. Defensive run save. But throw the metrics out. Cedric Mullins is a center fielder. Jeff McNeil is a good fielder wherever you put him that's able to beat some of these metrics because he gets the baseballs. He, takes good routes. He does the right things out there. And you always have that as a fallback option. You can always go back to Jeff McNeil. But for the next month, I think it's Cedric Mullins' show in center field every single day. You move Jeff McNeil back into the infield, which is why I say someone like Ronny should go down, because just like Francisco Alvarez was able to get better in Syracuse, granted under different circumstances, but not the worst thing to tell Ronny, look, you're amazing. September call-ups are going to happen in a month. We're going to expand the roster to 28. You're going to be right back up fighting for playing time. Go down there and just keep doing what you've been doing. And he can go down there and rake for a month and be Barry Bonds and then come right back, and you have this full roster where it's going to be a battle if people stay healthy to figure out who the 13 would actually be that you carry into October. And granted, sometimes based on how things line up, you might carry an extra position player in the playoffs. But as far as what the Mets get here, you're getting a guy that is a significantly better bat than Tyrone Taylor. And you're getting a guy that is a natural center fielder, whether he's a great one or not. Like Luis Robert is a better defensive center fielder. But I also think in a playoff atmosphere, playing in front of, in August, if he's playing every day, he's going to be ingratiating himself to a new fan base. And then that could go good or bad. But if it goes good, and you got these packed crowds at Citi Field with like 18 of 28 games or 19 of 28 games are played at home in August, he's a showman. Again, he put on a show for the fans at Camden Yards as a goodbye, knowing that he was probably going to get traded. I think under the right context, Cedric Mullins might have a great couple months. Did I think that Luis Robert was a better fit? Sure, and I can explain that more in the next segment. But when it comes to what the Mets get here, they needed a center fielder. They get a center fielder. They now have great depth. I don't think that this means, go turn around and trade one of those young players. We'll talk about that in the final segment, about how this, again, sort of shapes the roster moving forward, and I'll get to that. I already touched on it, but I'll go a little bit further on the Mauricio, Acuna, Vientos side of this whole thing and how the Mets have approached the deadline in regards to those guys. But right now, you get your center fielder. You check off another box, and who knows if the Mets make another trade while I'm doing this show. You still got 2 hours to the deadline to maybe get a starting pitcher or add another arm to the bullpen. So the Mets get their bat, but let's talk about the trade that wasn't in just a minute here. We'll go over the Luis Robert side of things. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Maybe you want to go and be there at Citi Field to welcome all the new Mets. Cedric Mullins. You want to be there to check out the change in arm slot from Tyler Rogers all the way at the submarine angle to Ryan Helsley throwing fire over the top. Well, if you want to get to the ballpark, Game Time is the way to do it. Game Time is the place to go for last-minute tickets, because the closer that you get to Game Time, the better deal you're going to get on your seats. When I go to games, I wait until I'm about to walk into the ballpark. Then I pull open the app. I view the seat map. I look at each view from the seat, so I know what I would expect when I buy those tickets and when I arrive. And if I like what I see, I can get my tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps, I'm all set. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game like Mets vs. Giants on Friday. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you all for tuning in to the live stream on YouTube. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 14,000 subscribers. We've already blown past that. I appreciate all of you helping us get to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. And let's now dive into the trade that wasn't, which is Luis Robert. The Mets wanted Luis Robert. He was the top target in center field, and rightfully so. He has an incredibly high ceiling, a ceiling that's much higher than Cedric Mullins. Yes, you go back and you find Mullins' best season in, 2021. He hit 30 home runs. He's not a 30 home run guy. The last 4 years, it's been 16, 15, 18, 15. Granted, I don't even know how many home runs Luis Robert has this year. He's got 11. So this season, Cedric Mullins has had more power. But with Luis Robert, there was a 38 home run season. He's a more eye-popping, athlete. Again, he complemented Jeff McNeil more, a right-handed bat who matches lefties, something that the Mets really struggle with. And Cedric Mullins is not going to help you out on that front. So when you look at it, and that also potentially could be the platoon, by the way. You could see Jeff McNeil as your starting center fielder against left-handed pitching in August. I could potentially see that, even though I just, again, made the case for Mullins to play every single day. But the point is, Robert was the guy they wanted. All the smoke was there. But there's a reason why Luis Robert might be a White Sox next season getting paid $20 million, because Chris Getz overplayed his hand. Chris Getz was probably asking for Mick Abel from the Phillies. And they said, you know what, we'll take him and we'll go get Duran from the Twins. We'll get a closer for 2.5 years over your outfielder that we see as a rental. The White Sox are shopping him and say, oh, Luis Robert, remember 2023? He's got 2.5 years of control. But those extra 2 years of control are $20 million club options that nobody wants to pick up, because the guy has had a sub 700 OPS for 2 straight seasons now. Now, he fit the Mets because you were thinking, oh, look at Andrew Vaughn, look at Gavin Sheets. These guys leave the White Sox, go somewhere else, and they're awesome. You're sort of betting against the White Sox at every turn. You don't know how to manage your players. You don't know how to manage your assets. We want to trade with you. Chris Getz got that maybe inferiority complex rolling, where he's trying to prove out, I'm the guy that's going to turn the White Sox around, and we need to get a great return. He wants to win today. He wants Luis Robert trade, and what everybody was doing yesterday for the Tyler Rogers trade. That's what Chris Getz wanted, for everyone to ooh and ah over the package that he got for Luis Robert. And by sticking to, I want Vientos, I want Acuna, I want Jonah Tong. Somebody said that today. Who knows if that was credible or not, but somebody on MLB Network said that the White Sox were asking for Jonah Tong. So if you're shooting for a level that's not reasonable, at a certain point, David Stern said, all right, well, I can't negotiate with you. You are selling Luis Robert as something that he is not. You look at the cost for bats in the market, the cost for bats has been nowhere near the cost of relievers, because every contender really needs a reliever. Every contender wants a bat, and that's the difference. And if you don't need it, you're not going to overpay to get it, at least to that extreme level that Chris Getz wanted for Luis Robert. And so, yeah, ultimately, do I think the Mets would have been a better team tomorrow if it was Luis Robert instead of Cedric Mullins? Yeah, I think they'd probably be a little bit of a better team. Do I think that there was a world that Robert could have been, next to Juan Soto every day, and some of that superstar rubbed off, and all of a sudden you see for a couple of months this incredible performance, and Robert is this amazing, knight that rides on in with his cape on the white horse, like Yoenis Cespedes? Was that theoretically an outcome that I was dreaming of as a Mets fan, like I'm sure a lot of you were? Sure. How likely was that going to actually happen when the guy has had a large volume of struggling against right-handed pitching? Who knows? He's been good out of the break, but Cedric Mullins has been good in July. So I honestly think that Mullins probably has maybe a little bit of a higher floor against right-handed, certainly against right-handed pitching, a much higher floor than Luis Robert. It's not exactly what you wanted, but ultimately it's still an upgrade. And I think the Mets were right to not trade Vientos, to not trade Acuna, to certainly not trade Tong. And I think what the Mets have proven at this deadline, as we'll sort of transition into the package here, is they're trading from the second to third tier of their pitching to get deals done. They don't want to trade Jet Williams. They don't want to trade Carson Bench. They don't want to trade their top 3 pitching prospects, Jonah Tong, Nolan McClain, or Brandon Sproat, because they see those 3 guys as the future of this team, as far as guys that will either end up being key starting pitchers or one day late inning weapons. Regardless of where they're going to end up filtering in throughout the next 5 years, they're going to be big time players for the Mets. And those are the guys they don't want to trade. And I think you can also see Jonathan Santucci, maybe an arm they didn't want to trade. You could see Jacob Reimer, Ryan Clifford, some of these other guys that are going to stick around. I think the Mets have probably a list of 10 to 15 prospects that they're just not going to move. And the reality is they have developed enough depth in this farce that they don't have to. So if you're talking to a GM that's being unreasonable, that's not going to take Nick Morabito as one of the headlining pieces, then or actually perfect example, I would not be shocked at all if that Gilbert Tidwell package was on the table for Luis Robert. I think it probably was at some level, because I think the Mets went into this deadline knowing we could package Blade Tidwell and Drew Gilbert together, and that's a pretty good return for a rental, whatever that rental is. And so I'm sure that they floated that. And when the White Sox weren't budging that they didn't want it, all right, fine. Well, we'll get Tyler Rogers. And I don't think they would have included Jose Butto in a Luis Robert trade, but I'd almost guarantee that whatever the White Sox get, it might not be as good as Tidwell Gilbert. It really might not. But if they're not going to entertain it, then you take it somewhere else and you get something else you need and you move forward. So here's what the Mets ultimately ended up giving up to get Cedric Mullins. Ramon Gomez, that's going to be the flashy, buzzy name. 4.63 ERA in the season, 48 strikeouts. So those stats might not jump out too much. Started the year in St. Lucie, had a 0.69 ERA, which is super nice. Then he gets up to high A, 6.95 ERA. So he struggled against more advanced competition. You just traded a guy who's 23 in high A and he has a 6.95 ERA, and he is the headlining piece. The reason he throws absolute fuel, and he hit 105 miles per hour in a game this year. So yeah, it's unfortunate to trade a guy like that, but if Ramon Gomez turns into some lights out closer, credit to the Baltimore Orioles, they'll have to develop him. The Mets signed him for $10,000, and here they go. They turn him into something when you're trying to win. It's a piece that you're willing to move. Then you have a couple of guys that were undrafted free agents. Chandler Marsh, 22 years old. He's got a 2.57 ERA on the season. Started out in St. Lucie, did not give up a run in 10 2/3. Got up to high A, 3.45 ERA in 31 1/3 innings pitched. But that's, looking at a guy that's a multi-inning reliever, you can find another one. That's the whole point. And then the same goes with Anthony Nunez, who was a really good story. He, again, undrafted guy. He was a shortstop at Tampa, started pitching in his final season. Mets see him, sign him as an undrafted free agent, as a pitcher. He's been very good. He did not give up what he gave up. His 0.63 ERA in high A. For a while, he didn't give up anything, like no hits, no nothing. He had 3 hits in 14 1/3 innings. Then he went up to Double A, has a 2.10 ERA in 25 2/3 innings pitched. A guy that very well could end up being a really nice reliever. And for the Mets, that might have happened in 2026. But it wasn't going to happen this year. And you're trying to win now, and you can find the next Anthony Nunez. So that's what the Mets gave up. They gave up 3 pitching prospects, guys that definitely have talent, but all of them likely outcome relievers, so you don't give up a starting pitcher in this deal. And you get a guy that clearly raises the floor of this team. How much does he raise the ceiling? That might be questionable, but again, Cedric Mullins is still capable of getting hot. He's still a guy that can do some nice things for you. 15 home runs, 14 stolen bases. Going to do a little bit of everything on a contending team where he's batting 9th. I mean, you can do a hell of a lot worse than Cedric Mullins in center field. And if he doesn't hit at all and it's just a nightmare fit, Jeff McNeil slides out to center field. But I want to talk about the fit a little bit more and how the Mets have potentially kept all these young infielders together through this deadline. Was that the right decision? We'll go through all of that here in just a minute. If you're an everydayer who always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks from the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. You get a line of graphics sent to your phone each day, so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go to social media. You can subscribe at subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about the fit. I've already sort of alluded to what I think will happen, which is Ronny Mauricio getting a tough option down. Here's why I believe it'll be Mauricio that gets sent down to accommodate this roster move. Unless the Mets trade Starling Marte, then, that would obviously open up a spot, but I don't think that that's going to happen. I feel antsy saying these things with the fact that I haven't checked Twitter in the 20 minutes or whatever it is I've been recording. The Mets haven't made another trade. Oh, the Astros got Correa? Okay. All right, so I missed a big trade. I'm sure my writing staff at Just Baseball hopefully is working on that one. Astros get Correa. Wow. That's wild. That's pretty cool. That's a cool fit. Getting back to the Mets side of things, they have not made another move. I don't think Marte is going anywhere. Your other option is to DFA Tyrone Taylor. Just chalk it up as a loss, but I think you could have done that if you got Luis Robert or Harrison Bader. I think you still want that elite defensive center field that you can plug into a playoff game, so I don't think that's going to happen. So then you look at your options. You're either going to option Luis Angel Acuna or you're going to option Ronny Mauricio, because you're not going to option Brett Beatty, and Mark Vientos doesn't have any options, not to mention he's swinging the bat really well, and I think he is your best shot at really having an elite offensive DH for this playoff run. I think you just play Mark Vientos at third base against left-handed pitching, you DH him against right-handed pitching, you bat Marte against left-handed pitching, you have him come off the bench, and that's sort of what you do. That's where I'm at with those guys. Now, Jeff McNeil moves into the infield. So how are you going to juggle playing time for McNeil and Ronny Mauricio? Now, I already said, okay, against left-handed pitching, you could put Jeff McNeil in center, and maybe you play Beatty at second, but you're not going to play Mauricio at second against lefties. He hasn't been good against lefties, and that could be something he has to work on. Go down in Syracuse and figure out your right-handed swing. How about that? And then you come up and you're even more valuable in September. That's a tangible developmental goal for Ronny Mauricio. That's why, to me, it makes sense. You clear Mauricio out of the way. And not that he needs to be. He's been great, but you let Jeff McNeil, get off his feet a little bit more, not have to be in center field every day in August, and you have him mostly at second base. You have Beatty going back and forth between third and second. You got Vientos between third and DH. The lineup just fits together. It makes the most sense to send Mauricio down. Otherwise, everyone's getting part-time playing time. And I'd rather in August for Cedric Mullins to get a ton of at-bats, for Mark Vientos to get a ton of at-bats, for Jeff McNeil to get a ton of at-bats, for Ronny Mauricio to get a ton of at-bats. Yes, against AAA pitching, but bunch of bat right-handed against some righties even, and see if you can work on it that way. I mean, just continue to develop your game. Maybe get some more work at second base. So that's another wrinkle the Mets can do, because they clearly didn't like his defense that much there. But in the playoffs, that's another thing you can add to your cap, or just have him play third base every day so he's elite over there if and when he comes back. I think Ronny Mauricio probably makes a playoff roster, but I think you just let that competition take place in September. Yes, you could send down Acuna, but I think Acuna still fills a legitimate bench role for this team. And also, I look at Acuna and that option that he has, and I think about the long-term vision. I think the Mets will have to make a decision on Beatty, Mauricio, and Vientos. 2 of the 3 should be part of the plans in 2026. 1 should be traded this offseason. But you make that decision after a playoff run. Acuna, he is such an easy fit on this roster. You can stick him as the 13th man on the Mets roster for the next 5 years. And if you don't send him down again this season, you still retain an option year. So next season, you still have that flexibility for a guy that, versatility might be his best asset in the big leagues. Give him another year of versatile optionality where you can send him down to Syracuse if your roster ever gets crowded. I think it makes sense to preserve Acuna's option more than Mauricio's. Ronny Mauricio should not be in AAA much longer, and he really shouldn't be AAA at all. But because of the Mets' certain roster situation, I think it makes the most sense. Next year, Ronny Mauricio should be playing every day, probably somewhere, with the way he's been swinging the bat, whether that's with the Mets or whether they use his value and trade him. But again, those are conversations to have in the offseason when it comes to trading these guys. I think the Mets made the right call not giving up on any of them, because each one of them can contribute to this roster. And ultimately, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who might go down. And so giving up a Mauricio or a Vientos or a Beatty or an Acuna, getting rid of guys who are MLB players. That's what those 4 guys have proven this season. How good they'll be, who's a starter, who's an all-star, who's a bench guy, who's a utility guy. I mean, the range of outcomes for particularly Beatty, Mauricio, and Acuna, it's up and down. With Vientos, it's sort of, is he going to hit or is he not going to hit? But regardless of future roles or anything else, they have all proven that they are big leaguers. They're either a really good big league defender in the case of Acuna, or they're big league bats in the case of Mauricio, Beatty, and Vientos. And you need as many big league contributors to finish the marathon and find your way to winning a World Series. And so it didn't make sense unless you were getting some type of a star player that just probably didn't exist on this market for the Mets. Could you have traded Mark Vientos for Steven Kwan? I don't even know. And what does Steven Kwan do for you? Yes, great defender in left. Is he a great defender in center? You just don't know, and he's not going to bring much power. Yes, is he an upgrade for sure? But it's not just Vientos. It would have been Vientos and Nolan McLean or Jonah Tong. And if you want to hold on to those top prospects, which the Mets did, they've been able to address all of these needs from an area of their farm system that's an absolute strength. So now what do you have? What does this team look like going into October if they don't make any other moves? They got an absolute lights out bullpen. You got Diaz and Helsley, so you have two closers that you can employ however you want to. You have Tyler Rogers, who has been, by the numbers, maybe like the most effective setup man in baseball for the past 4 years. Ridiculously good. And I didn't even realize, just as good on left as on right. I mean, you say, oh, he's tough on righties because of that angle. He's tough on everybody because they think the ball is rising on them, because it is, throwing from that slot. You got Gregory Soto, a nightmare on lefties. Brooks Raley's been really good. Reed Garrett was your 8th inning guy 2 weeks ago. So your bullpen is locked and loaded. Ryan Stanek, a dude that throws hard. That's the way I describe him at this point, but he's still there. And then you have Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat that I think are going to play roles in some capacity down the stretch. Two arms that they've been developing all year in AAA that are about ready to go and to help. And so if they're multi-inning guys, if maybe one of them slides into the rotation because you shorten up Clay Holmes because he's looking a little fatigued, and I talked about that on the show, but I could see Clay Holmes and Nolan McLean being, stapled together for 2 weeks here, where they both just pitched yesterday. They could go on the same day. If you want Clay Holmes to still start, but you want to start slowing down his pitch count, say, all right, Clay, you got 60 pitches today, and Nolan McLean, you're going to make your MLB debut behind him. You can do that, and you can sort of ease McLean into the big leagues, but in a consistent role, and you can tamper down Holmes' innings. So eventually Clay Holmes, who's been a elite late inning reliever and has pitched in the playoffs, he's in your bullpen for the playoffs, which is what we all sort of expected when he signed with the Mets anyway, that he would start for the first half of the season, eventually get to a certain innings number, and then be tapered off when you got to October. You can start to do that. And the Mets still have time. For all I know, they might trade for a starting pitcher, and then you don't even have to promote the kids. You can just shorten up the kids to conserve their innings, and they might just be relief options. So there's definitely still a move or two the Mets could make. If they want to, if they just want to keep building their bullpen right now, technically, they have 6 arms in it. The other 2 are Rico Garcia and Chris Davinsky. They could decide, you know what, it's a lot easier to trade for a reliever than a starter. Let's just grab one more relief arm. Let's just grab Dennis Santana for the heck of it and throw him in the back of our bullpen too. They'll probably find a guy that can pitch multiple innings. And they still have Huascar Braziban, who is going down for a reset and to lengthen up. He can definitely be a guy that can give you 2 innings and come back. And if he pitches the way he did early in the season, that's another arm that you would trust in October potentially. So they have done what they needed to this bullpen. The starting pitching market hasn't moved at all for anybody, really. So, I mean, Shane Bieber got traded for a pitching prospect that's better than I think anything the Mets would have given up to get him today. It was like Cal Steven. And I just looking at the numbers, I think he's a step below the Mets' top 3, but it's a step above the guys that they'd be willing to move. And so it is what it is. They didn't pull off that trade if they're even in the mix on it. But again, not a lot of starting pitchers that have moved, at least as far as I know right now. You still have Zach Allen on the table. You still have Merrill Kelly on the table. You still have, it looks like the Astros got Jesus Sanchez too. Rangers got Danny Coulomb. So that's some of the latest moves. But James Outman was in the Brock Stewart trade. Yeah, so you still have Edward Cabrera, you still have Sandy. Doesn't sound like Mitch Keller is going to move. The starting pitching market has remained quiet this whole time. So we'll see if all of a sudden, there's an hour and a half left. If we get a flurry of starting pitching moves, close things out for this deadline, and maybe the Mets can pull off a trade, I think they'll be opportunistic in that market. But if not, again, maybe they push across a reliever trade if they just decide, oh, this is a price that we're comfortable with. Let's just get one more arm and kind of just quadruple down on it. But if not, they did what they had to. They fixed that bullpen. They made it better than I think we could have expected. I was hoping for one high leverage arm and a decent lefty. So if it would have been Rogers and Soto, I would have been fine. If it would have been Helsley and Soto, I would have been fine. They got Helsley and Rogers and Soto. So that was really what this deadline was mostly about. But I'm glad they still got Cedric Mullins. It gives you another option. It makes your team better. It gives you a better shot at keeping Jeff McNeil healthy for the playoffs. I think is important to not burn him out. And like I said, I think it gives, with not trading any of the young players, all of these guys a chance to play a little bit more this season, to learn more about what you have, so that in the offseason, when the Mets either are coming off of a World Series title, a deep playoff run, or something more disappointing than that, they will have still in their holster all those young infielders and all their absolute top prospects. So maybe the superstar that wasn't on the table at the deadline, if you are someone that's thinking, man, why didn't the Mets push more chips in? Maybe X superstar pops up, X ace pops up, and all of a sudden the Mets are swinging a deal that none of us expected and getting something better than they could have gotten at this deadline. I think the Mets have done a great job at balancing the need to win now, and they've pushed enough chips in, and they've gotten enough that I think this is a team that's got as good of a shot as any in the National League to make a run, get hot at the right time, and win the World Series. I honestly believe that's the case. But they also did not hurt their future whatsoever. And that's a win-win. And part of that is because of all the work they've been doing in the last 2 years. Because the infrastructure, the foundation for this organization is so much higher than it was before David Stearns came in, as far as how they're developing, how they're identifying pitchers. You just got a starting center fielder at the deadline for 3 guys that you essentially acquired for absolutely nothing. I mean, pretty good move. I'll be back after the deadline, likely, unless there's a trade that happens before it. I'll probably wait till the deadline ends, and maybe we'll do a show later tonight if there is another move. If the Mets don't make another move, then I'll give you a full recap of everything that happened tomorrow morning. But that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Appreciate all of you that tuned into the live stream. For those of you that will be listening to the replay once I get the audio side of this thing up, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. Covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team, league experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.